Dr. Darshan Shah, how are you doing today? It's such a pleasure to see you.
So good to see you again, twice in like a month, right? You were just on my podcast,
I
and
know. And I get to see you tonight.
I know, cannot wait.
Cannot wait.
What a great relationship and, a partnership that we've developed. And I just love your approach to the message that you're spreading, and I'm honored to be here.
Mm. Well, I love your story because it is a story of, in a way, a lot of redemption, of optimizing health, and really a turning point for you. And it's a story of hope too, because I think a lot of people find themselves in a health issue or a health crisis and really think that there's no way out. Not in a way that like reversing and moving to a state of more optimized cellular energy, more aliveness, and more longevity. So, would you be down to share your story with my amazing community today?
Yes, I'd love to. So I'm a physician. I've been a physician now for 30 years. And I've spent the first couple of decades of my life being a very busy surgeon. So I did lots of kinds of surgeries. I did general surgery, trauma surgery, worked in the emergency room, did reconstructive surgery after cancer, and even some plastic surgery. And through that career, what happens when you're a doctor and you're a surgeon and you're super busy is you just keep getting busier and busier and busier. And I was working long hours, and then I had a young family. And what happens when you are working a lot and then you have a business, because then I had bought my own surgical center, I had employees, then I had my family and my kids. What happens to you? You put yourself at the bottom of all the priorities about around all the people in your life. And I had done the same thing. And my health really suffered, my physical health, my mental health, all of it. And I found myself when I was 40 years old being 50 pounds overweight, also multiple medical problems like high blood pressure, diabetes, an autoimmune condition, lots of problems, which means I had a lot of medications I'm on and a lot of doctors I was seeing myself. And I just thought that there had to be a better way. There's no way that I could be going down this path of chronic disease that was just going to get managed with pharmaceuticals and then eventually, an early death, right? Because we know no matter how many pharmaceuticals you throw at people, people just get sicker and sicker and dealing with chronic disease. You look at the top 10 causes of death on the CDC's website, almost all of them are from chronic disease. And so I was headed down that path. And I knew there had to be a better way. So I went out there and started to get educated. I knew a big part of my problem was my horrible diet. So I said, let me just learn how to eat better, because no one could really tell me. And I took a course in nutrition. And from there, I learned nutrition is very nuanced, and you have to apply it to what's going to work for you and your biology. And then from there, I learned about functional medicine, because a lot of nutritionists were looking into functional medicine and they told me about it. And then I realized my hormones and my gut health were a problem, and I fixed those. And then over time, I just gained the knowledge to get myself better and reverse chronic disease. And this is something we never talk about in Western medicine is once you get a chronic disease, it's almost like a life sentence, right? There's no talk about reversal. And I found that I could reverse my chronic diagnoses. And not only could I reverse them, I could get off pharmaceuticals. And not only could I get off pharmaceuticals, I could feel better and lose weight and keep the weight off and have more energy and not feel like my joints ached and all of that. And so this just launched this journey for me where I thought, number one, I totally benefited from it myself. I was able to reverse pretty much all my chronic diseases in under a year and get off 10
I
of
just
my
want to just hear that
pharmaceuticals.
under a
Yeah,
year.
under a
That is
year. Yeah.
incredible. And I have a
Reversed.
feeling, Dr. Shah, I'm curious because you have been so accomplished. I mean, talk about, I would call it head on a swivel. Like you're just running from one thing to the next, especially also with family as well. Nutrition was a big piece, lifestyle was a big piece. Did you change anything in terms of your profession, like how you were operating professionally as well at the time?
Yeah, yeah. And we talk a lot about these interventions, but really a major intervention that rarely gets talked about is just finding some time for self-care. And so I just built that into my daily routine. Every morning I spent an hour just on myself and taking care of myself. And I think that was pivotal from my personal health journey. And to me, that's like intervention number one, just finding some time. And I booked an hour for myself every morning. I was operating on weekends as well. So then I made a rule to never operate on weekends. And slowly over time, I decided that this was the kind of medicine I wanted to practice, as functional medicine, lifestyle medicine. And I changed my career completely to something that I had more control over my hours.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a physician practitioner, man, the hours are so grueling, like out the gate. And you really don't have a lot of control over them unless you really shift gears in terms of the type of medicine you want to practice. And so I was curious about that as well, because it's one thing to change our diets and maybe even maybe get better sleep and have that self-care piece. But if the stress is there, you can find yourself, it just that recovery in terms of reversing those cardiometabolic conditions, it could take a little bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a really good point. Stress management is a big part of the puzzle as well. And it's one of those things that's kind of like in the ether, right? Like we always talk about, like, let's reduce our stress levels, let's manage our stress levels. And then people ask, well, how? And then the answer is always, meditate. And meditation works. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but everyone needs to find what works for them, what is truly moving the needle for them. And for me, it was reading 30 minutes every morning, just spending 30 minutes reading every morning. I think that moved the needle more for me than even I do have a meditation practice, but even meditation. And so I think there's a lot of discovery within yourself of what is going to move the needle for you. And I talk about that a lot now. It's called N of one medicine. We have all these interventions and we apply them like shotgun to everybody. And really, certain interventions work really well for an individual, and certain individuals, the interventions don't work at all. And certain interventions can even harm you if they're like a supplement or a medication that you're taking. So you really have to discover what's working for you on an N of one basis, meaning the research study that is the most beneficial to you is the one where you are the only participant in that
Mm.
research study.
I want to spend a little bit of time on that as well, because I love what you are creating with Next Health and some functional medicine area, and how you're working with people one on one, looking at their biomarkers and trying things out. Because you're right. Like I'll be honest with you, cold plunging, not my nervous system, not so much. And so I know that. And meditation, I love it, but it doesn't move the needle like walking in nature does for me.
Mhm.
And there's so many other side benefits. I love the blood glucose benefit. I love the digestive benefit. I just feel like I'm checking a lot of boxes when I'm walking out in nature. And I'm curious, with all the people that you have coming through Next Health and even through the functional medicine space for you, I know that everyone's going to be a little bit different, but have you seen some things that move the needle a little bit more than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's so great for you to say that about walking, because to me, walking, if I only have 30 minutes and I could go for a walk or spend 30 minutes meditating, I'll go for a walk too.
Me too.
And so, I feel like there's a lot of like almost like gaslighting, or you're made to feel guilty if you don't meditate sometimes. And I tell people that's not the only means to an end. There's so many other means to the end, because the end is really just reducing stress and just feeling good. And there's many ways to get there. But there are definitely interventions that work for the majority of the people. And so I always call that the Pareto principle. What is the place where you can spend 15% effort and get 85% result? Like, where should you focus first? And so with every category of health, I think there's one intervention that does that. So for example, in nutrition, the one intervention is, believe it or not, it doesn't matter what you're eating. Like, it's not avocados or blueberries. It is eliminating ultra processed food. The elimination of ultra processed food will move the needle more than anything else you could potentially put into your body. Because guess what? Once you eliminate ultra processed food, pretty much everything you put into your body is going to be something that's going to be a net service to you versus a disservice, right? Eliminating any food sensitivities or allergies you might have. So I think, like, there is that one thing that you can do in nutrition is eliminate ultra processed food. What is the one thing you can do, for example, in exercise? Well, it's not optimizing your zone 2 versus zone 5 activity. That's not what it is. It's really not being sedentary. We know that even if you have the ultimate workout routine that's perfectly dialed in with lactate thresholds and VO2 max and all of that, you completely negate the effect of an hour workout by being sedentary for 8 hours in your office every day. So by eliminating that sedentary time, and the way you do that is by taking a 15-minute movement break every 45 minutes, or a 5 to 15-minute movement break every 45 minutes, well researched in the science to pretty much eliminate the negative effect of sedentary behavior in your day to day. So with like every category of health, there's that one thing that you can do. And I give people those as like kind of like the big rocks that you have to get down first before we start working on kind of the more specific interventions.
Yeah, and I love those so much. One, removing ultra processed foods and added sugar, or especially sugar, liquid sugars are a big one that I talk about a lot with my
Yes.
patients. And then also, yes, building your life around movement. It doesn't have to be the one big workout. It's mini walk breaks, it's squat breaks, it's just moving your body so that you're not sitting all day long. I'm about to get in a car in a little bit to drive to you,
Mhm.
and I will be doing some squats before I get in the car and after I get in the car so that I am breaking up, even breaking up that drive in terms of movement breaks. And so it's just about being intentional. It doesn't have to be a lot. Yes, it's important that we do some zone 5 and zone 2 training. Yes, it's important that we lift weights, but more importantly, it's moving your body that matters the most.
Yes, absolutely. Can I give you like a quick hint on the car drive thing too?
Yeah, yeah, I would love it.
So
Yes, please.
yeah, a lot of people do the same drives over and over again, right? Like we drive to work or we drive to certain places, and we know in our lives what drives are going to be more than 45 minutes long, right? And so those drives, pick a place that inspires you to stop, whether it be somewhere for you to like go out and just look at the view, right? There's so many viewpoints you can pull off on. And yes, you're going to invest an additional 5 to 10 to 15 minutes to do this, but guess what? It's going to be a great, first of all, elimination of sedentary behavior for too long. But number two, also, like it's a good mental break for you as well. And number three, and probably most importantly, it breaks up that drive, which actually makes the drive itself safer. Because when you're driving for long periods of time, it's been shown that there's a higher chance the longer you're driving of getting to an accident, the longer that drive is. And so there's a lot of benefits to just like having little, I would say, interruptions to your daily patterns that you can make that could potentially be very beneficial. So between San Diego to LA, I know there's some beautiful spots you can stop, and maybe there's one in the middle you can find and make it part of the routine journey.
Yeah, yeah, I'll take a look because I want to make sure that I'm on time to see you as well. I'm curious for you because I mean, both of our days are long days, right? And then we have kids. We have kids at the end of the day. I'd love for you to share what are some of the ways that you break up your day? Is a walk around the block? I remember when I was visiting you in your office, I just walked up Sunset Boulevard and then came back to the car. So I was curious, is it some push-ups? Is it squats? Is it connecting with employees? What do you do to break up your day?
I was just looking for my egg timer. So I have an egg timer that I have on my desk.
I
And
love that.
yeah, I just set it to 45 and it goes in 45 minutes. And that's a key to me to do something. So sometimes what I'll do is I'm in an office building here. And so I'll go downstairs, grab a glass of water and do a quick lap around the office building, come back. It feels so good to do that. If I have something I need to get to immediately, I'll do some air squats. I'll also, I always try to walk to lunch and make sure I have like a really intentional lunch break built into the day. And there's certain things that I'll also do, like I'll make a phone call to my parents or something that I know is a good like mental break and something that I know I want to do and I often don't get an opportunity to do. So I have these little things that are just like on my list, and every 45 minutes that egg timer goes off and I get to pick one of them.
I love that. So I love that you've got the list right there.
Hmm.
Because I know some people are like, well, when I'm in my workday, I'm doing life. And I'm like, but you can have the egg timer, you can have your phone, you can have your list. Also, put that list, I would say put it on a refrigerator or put it on your pantry. I would say we're one thought away. We're one thought away from eating whatever's in there or for grabbing our tennis shoes and going for a walk. We're one fun thought away of, having that extra vanilla latte or whatever that may be, or moving our body or doing a little dance break with your family. So have those things listed. I think it can be so helpful. That way you're confronted by that list.
Yeah. And we also have decision fatigue as we move through the day. So if you don't have your list of decisions in front of you, you almost don't even want to think about what the potentials are. And you don't think about them. And you just keep, barreling forward without having those options in front of you. But that list next to my egg timer, it's fantastic for me because I'm like, oh yeah, I do need to call my parents, and then I'll remember. And sometimes just because of decision fatigue we have during the day, you just forget even what your options are.
Yeah, well, and I just want to bring up your event tonight because here we are in the middle of the week, getting together as friends and colleagues, and that's connection. And I love that you're so intentional about that because it's so easy to say, well, life is busy. I've got things going on. It's back to school this week or whatever it may be, and not scheduling that time. How important to you is connection and spending time? So you talk to your parents probably consistently. You obviously get to spend time with your kids as well. But how do you kind of bookend time with the people that you love?
You just have to, once again, you have to be very intentional about it, I think. And so on my Google Calendar, I put in the day of the month, every month, that I'm going to have a dinner party. And so it's on my calendar, and I'll try to plan it to when, maybe someone's flying in for a podcast and I want to introduce them to the community, or there's something special going on with our neighbors, or something, my kid's birthday. But there's always going to be once a month a dinner party on my calendar, and it is like blocked out in bright orange. And that way I know it's coming and I know it's there, and I work towards it. I have time to prepare for it, all of it. And so I think you just have to get really intentional, because if you try to remember that you need community time and you're halfway through the week and you're like, oh, when am I going to fit this in now? It doesn't happen. Right. And so I think that's one piece of what I do for the monthly big thing, but there also has to be little things in there too. So for example, every Sunday, I always go for a hike. Sometimes I like to do it by myself, but many times I love hiking with somebody else. I'll just put out an APB on a text group. Let's anyone in for a hike this Sunday and those kind of things. And so, yeah. And so I think once again, it sounds like you're like me, like we're like big list makers. So I have lists of these community times that I have in my mind that I have time to spend time with my community. And I just kind of go down the list there.
I love that. And I think because I was thinking about the things that matter in terms of longevity, I want to pivot a little bit towards what longevity means to you as you are helping people to create that in themselves as they move into their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. And these, to me, with the ones that we're talking about, these are the tenets of longevity, the movement, the reducing, eating real food, and spending time with the people that we love, doing the things that we love. I think those are big ones. But I'd love for you to define what longevity means to you, because this is very much a focal point or a through line in the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, like I've been in this longevity space now for 15 years. And from, when I first started changing my own lifestyle to then opening the business 10 years ago. And now here we are. And during this time period, we had the pandemic, we've seen the rise, and now I almost hate to say this out loud, but the fall of biohacking, and even though biohacking can still be very positive, I think, a lot of influencers have turned it into this like crazy world. But I've seen all these trends come and go, and I really don't want the word longevity to turn into something where it's applying crazy biohacks that are expensive to trying to live to 250 years old, right? I don't think that's what longevity really means. To me, longevity, and this is what we practice at our clinics, is a combination of four pillars. And you can almost look at these pillars actually as a pyramid. And the base of longevity is lifestyle medicine. These are all the things that we're talking about right now. Getting incredible nutrition into your body, sleeping and resting appropriately, managing your stress levels, spending time with community, moving your body. This is the basis and the foundation of longevity that without it, nothing else matters, right? You can do anything else and it won't really move the needle for you. But once you have that right and you feel pretty good about it, you also need to work on that constantly, because all of this can slip away so easily as we add more things into our life. And so it's always like this constant, I would say, struggle to keep this into your day to day, but it's worth it every single day having a focus and attention on this. After that, I consider functional medicine the next pillar of longevity and the next layer on the pyramid. Functional medicine is finally focusing in on those areas of medicine that Western medicine has typically ignored. Things like hormonal health, gut health, eliminating toxins from your life. Those are so important, and those need to be the next piece of the puzzle. Then we move on to preventative medicine. So, medicine is doing a really good job of creating diagnostics for us where we can detect disease early. The problem is we use all these diagnostics way too late. We wait until you get diagnosed with a disease before we start doing something about it. When we know 20 to 30 years pass by before you get diagnosed with a disease, and there's changes there. So this is what when we use biomarkers and really empower people with access to biomarkers, blood tests, urine tests, even tests that we can do on site, such as things like balance and hearing tests, et cetera, to really help people understand like what direction they're headed and course correct 30 years prior to where we're course correcting now in Western medicine. And then the last tippy top of the pyramid is longevity medicine and biohacking, using some of the newest technologies like peptides, for example, biologics and stem cells and exosomes and plasma exchange to really get to, N of one experimentation on using these interventions to add to the puzzle. And not everyone has access to this stuff, but that's why I tell people like this is currently expensive, but you need to know about it. But over time, it's going to get more and more affordable and more within grasp of people. And, we're seeing the price of peptides and stem cells come down just like genetic testing has come down over the last few decades, and more people will have access. So you should at least know about it because you will be able to participate in that world soon. But none of that really matters as much as all the other layers of the pyramid. So.
Yeah. I love the foundation. And I love that big message that you said in the beginning of this, which was consistency.
Mhm.
That it is about consistency. People always ask, okay, what is the thing? And I'm like, it's consistency. That is the thing. Consistently going to bed at the same time, consistently waking up at the same time in the morning, consistently moving your body, consistently fueling your body with great food. Now, I know we live in a time of bioobservability where we can really look at these things in real time, whether that's a continuous glucose monitor or it's a Whoop or an Oura ring, or it's even looking at our biomarkers, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4 times a year. I want to spend a little bit of time on those diagnostics and looking at that. I'm also a big proponent of what you said in terms of not majoring in the minors,
Yeah.
and not to say that those aren't great in terms of optimizing our health in terms of an N of one, but I think understanding this information, this data for ourselves, and then making those lifestyle changes, that's what's going to really move the needle. Would you spend a little bit of time and talk to me about some of the most important biomarkers that you are looking at? And from the perspective of the data that you guys have been collecting, what you are seeing playing out, even people in their 40s, and what we need to be paying attention to, what we need to be asking, and then what are some interventions that we could be thinking about in terms of shifting those biomarkers?
Yeah, for sure. So, first I'll just say biomarkers to me means more than just blood tests. For example, if you buy like a simple $14 grip dynamometer on Amazon, that's a really important biomarker. What is your grip strength, right? I can't tell you the number of times you measure this on people and they're very surprised that their strength is at the 20th fifth percentile of where it should be for other people their age, right? Same as like a blood pressure cuff. Like you and I both know, hypertension is called a silent killer because it just sits there happening in our body for decades before anyone does anything about it. So I think having a few biomarkers that you follow and understand what they mean is massive because biomarkers used to be when I was a doctor, only doctors could order them. And not when I was a doctor. I'm still
You're
a
still a
doctor.
doctor. You mean
Yeah,
when you were
when I was trained as a
yes.
doctor. Yes, yes. When I was trained, doctors had to order a blood test, and doctors were the gatekeepers of blood tests. You could not say, I want this blood test. A doctor would often convince you, you don't need this blood test because you look fine, which is crazy to me.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Because you can see diabetes or you can
Right.
see blood pressure issues. And mind you, that's always a vital that we're going to do when you go in. But you can't see insulin resistance or
No.
pre-diabetes. That's not going to
Right.
be written on your face.
Right, exactly. So thank you for saying that. It's just mind blowing. So now people have access to their data. But step two is having personal responsibility to understand what that data means, why it's important, and following it yourself. No one cares more about your health than you do. Maybe your significant other does. But other than that, very few people have the time to spend some energy on this, right? Thirdly, what I would say is we live in an incredible era where the wearables are giving us massive amounts of beautiful data for us to look at. HRV is one biomarker that, you and I never grew up with this.
No, but I look at it every single day.
Yeah, right. And I just saw yesterday, about a month ago, the continuous blood pressure monitor by Hilo got approved by the FDA. This is incredible. This will change lives for sure. So we have so much more data and it's getting super cheap to track this. I mean, you can buy like a Fitbit now for $40 on Amazon. So everyone should like participate in this, in looking at this data. And obviously, data, you can get overwhelmed. And if you're overwhelmed by it, just take it off for a few months and don't look at it. But at least having a baseline and knowing where you are is important. Lastly, what I would say is the data is useful for a couple of different reasons. Number one, diagnosing disease 20 to 30 years before it becomes a disease. And now you're on expensive medications or surgery to treat it. But also, the data is important is because typically there's pieces of data that doctors don't look at because they don't know what to do about it because there's mostly lifestyle interventions. Inflammation is like a particularly important one. We have a data point called HSCRP, highly sensitive C-reactive protein, which tells us if you're inflamed or not. And if you're inflamed, there's a lot of things you can do about it, but it's in your gut health, it's in your oral health, it's in your movement, and there's no pill to reduce HSCRP, right? And so there's no reason for doctors to check it or talk about it. So now you have access to data that the medical establishment doesn't really use. And so these are all really good points about data. You asked me for a few pieces of data that everyone should be looking at. HSCRP is one, fasting insulin is another one, hemoglobin A1C, vitamin D levels. And, what's so crazy about all of these markers is if you look at your blood test that your doctor did on you, it's 9 times out of 10, these aren't even checked.
No, they're not on there.
Yeah, unless it's a functional medicine doctor. So, you can get these blood tests yourself now online. There's a lot of companies providing them or asking your doctor for them or seeing a functional medicine doctor who'll do it all, who'll get them all for you as well.
Yeah, and I think you can still advocate for your primary doctor, maybe even your OBGYN, and just say, when you go to your doctor's office, bring the list. And you can make a case, you can say, listen, my energy's been really bad. I've had it really severe, whatever the symptoms are. I think I'm inflamed. Would you be willing to look at those? Or so I've had the argument pushed back at me, especially for the vitamin D lab, just like, oh, insurance may ask you to pay for it. And I'm like, whatever, just add it on and I'll deal with it on the back end. And usually it always is covered. And so
right.
it's not a big deal to ask for.
Yeah, it's not a big deal to ask for it. I mean, and yeah, that's a good point. Just tell your doctor, like, just order it and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And
I would say, hey, I'm 40. I'm midlife. If I'm doing a colonoscopy, can we look at my vitamin D levels?
Exactly. Exactly. By the way, I have a really great tool that's free for people. If you go to drshah.com/biomarkers, it's a 5-page PDF guide for what you should ask your doctor for, what each biomarker means, what's the optimal range, and why it's important. So it's a free guide. Anyone can get it by going to drshah.com/biomarkers. And I put that out there for free because I do a lot of podcasts. And this is like the number one comment I get is like, well, what biomarker should I check? And why is it important? And so I just listed it all out for people.
I love that. And I love that you included those reference ranges, particularly the functional reference ranges. So you think about the vitamin D lab, since we're spending a little bit of time on that, how low it can go and how it's nowhere near optimal range in terms of what we're looking at. And so that'll be really important. And one of the things that you were saying as we were talking about this is that, with this type of data, especially if we're looking at it in the right way, we're looking at those functional levels, we really can see something 10 plus years out in advance. If we are looking within those functional levels, if we're looking at just normal ranges, again, you could be 99 milligrams per deciliter of fasting glucose. You're 1 milligram per deciliter away from prediabetes, and someone would tell you that it's normal if you didn't know when it comes to fasting glucose. And so those labs are going to be really important for you to look at, but also note that we want you within that functional range. And if you start moving away from the functional range, yes, it still is quote unquote normal in our traditional healthcare system, but note that that's telling us that maybe 5, 10, 15 years out, if we keep going down this path, you will absolutely be in that, I call it the pathology range, the pathological range.
Right. Absolutely. It's such a good point is not just looking at sometimes a printout that you get from the lab and saying, oh, everything's in the normal range.
It's in the green.
Exactly. It's headed in the wrong direction. And that's why we also advocate for, having some regular cadence for checking these as well. So if you become a member of Next Health, we automatically check it for you every quarter. And that's kind of our cadence that we like. And we don't check everything every quarter. We check 20 to 25 things every quarter that really matter. And that's kind of what I think of when I talk to my patients is like seeing the directionality of where things are headed is also important.
I agree. Well, and I think it's important for people to note, as you shared in your own personal N of one journey, how you were able to walk back a lot of those labs to get them back into functional range within a year. I think a lot of people think that once those are out of range, they're not going to be able to walk those back. That's very much been the narrative that we've been taught. But I have been looking at labs quarterly on my patients for years. And I will tell you, so much can change in 90 days. We can go in the optimal direction and we could go in the not so optimal direction. Ideally, if you're working with me and I've got that level of consistency where I am holding you accountable, we are definitely moving back into the optimal range. But I have seen people walk back type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, high levels of triglycerides and cholesterol, metabolic syndrome in a matter of 90 days. Not a year, 90 days. And when we're looking at that timeline of labs and your biomarkers, that is what's giving us that data to say that we're moving in the right direction. And that's more of the hardcore data. They're subjective as well. Like, I need to know that you're feeling amazing, you're noticing a shift and change in your energy and your sleep and your stress levels. But that information can really show that we are moving in the right direction. And I'm assuming that's why you guys are doing it too.
That's exactly why we're doing it. Yeah. And, this is a brand new way of thinking about medicine. I mean, this just started happening in the last few years. So it's so exciting for everyone that's listening to you talk about this because really it's a new way of thinking and it involves a lot of personal responsibility and education, but we should have been doing this for decades already. And so it's exciting to see finally people are listening, they're doing it. And, you talk a lot about hormones and so do I. And it's this, hormones were never checked unless there was a major symptomatic problem going on. And gosh, we could fix things within months way before it becomes a symptom or a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting right now in the world of perimenopause and menopause, with a lot of physicians and OBGYNs who are still very driven by symptoms. And I will say that when it comes to perimenopause, it is a clinical diagnosis of symptoms. We don't have one test. It doesn't just announce itself one day like, oh, I'm here. But it's interesting the pushback between functional doctors and traditional doctors in terms of being willing to run labs. And so it's an interesting world right now where we are still seeing pushback on looking at those numbers to kind of optimize healthcare plans and hormone therapy protocols.
Yeah, and I love it. There's companies out there like Function Health now. You can just go and $500 and get a massive set of blood work. And we love it when people come in with their Function Health results because we could say, okay, let's sit down, let's go through these. Let's finally give you some information. And so it's available now for everybody. And even if your doctor doesn't want to order them for you, you can find a service like Function Health that will get them for you.
Absolutely. I have my second Function Health lab test draw this Friday that I'm
Nice.
gearing up for. But it's so fun. I run labs probably 3 times a year, unless something's popping up and I really need to stay on top of it. But I just got my first set of labs a couple weeks ago, and my highly sensitive CRP was under zero point 0, under 0.5, 0.5. And I was just so happy. I think my vitamin D levels were at 60. And so I was like, yes. And so we'll see what happens with the second set of labs, because again, even as we are consistent with our interventions, we're consistent with what we're doing, sometimes things just creep up. And for me, it could be, perimenopause could be the reason why things are shifting. And as I move into my later 40s. And so having those data points to go back to and refer back to, I think is so important, but also having a timeline so that you
Yeah.
can stay on top of things that are shifting. The one thing I will say for sure for women in this perimenopause and menopause journey is that the same interventions that you've been doing for a lot of your life, as your body begins to change, as your hormones begin to decline, they may not be working the same way that they used to.
Exactly. It's such an important point because we have to remember that we live on Earth and we are living through time. And our biology changes as time progresses. We age. And also, when you're living on Earth, you get exposed to different things at different times that, depending on where you are and what season it is, all of that. So, for example, we'll find people, their HSCRP will just shoot through the roof all of a sudden. And we find out, oh, they went on a trip where they ate some food that gave them a stomach bug and now or their gut microbiomes off, for example. Or we'll see people, like you said, go through hormonal changes that just happen over time. And so it's really important to check again, on some frequencies so you can see how your environment is affecting your biomarkers as well. And it also goes to the point of doing N of one experiments. So for example, maybe you're starting a new supplement and you're trying to get your vitamin D levels up and you take this supplement and your vitamin D level's not moving. Well, maybe that supplement is not giving you an adequate dose of vitamin D, or maybe it's just not a good supplement. So you can keep seeing what's working and not working as time moves forward. Maybe there's an intervention you're doing, like you started training for a marathon and you love it, and then you start training for like a marathon every month. And we see this a lot actually. We see people in their 50s that are like really get into running a lot of marathons, believe it or not,
That's my
because they
mother.
look
I know
amazing.
exactly who
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, and look, net positive, it works for a lot of people, but there is such a thing as overtraining and causing inflammation because you're overtraining. And so we do notice like, hey, now it's time to like shift this back a little bit as well. So, there's a lot of interventions like that we are constantly doing N of one experiments, and they might work great for some people and not great for others. And you just want to know how it's working for you.
Yeah, I was thinking my mom started running marathons when she was 50. She's 64 right now. She's training again for another marathon. And it's a constant conversation of looking at labs, seeing what she can do. And we've spaced out her half marathons and marathons. On the
Right.
one hand, she's gossiping with her friends, she's having fun conversation. It's her group, it's her running group. And on the other hand, we will see as she gets closer to that marathon, her highly sensitive CRP will start to ramp up and get above 2. And so I'm like, okay, we know this is the result of you just kind of pounding that pavement every single week.
Yeah, and I think also a lot of people, just to stick to this example, when they're training really hard, their diet sometimes suffers as well. And you'll see their fasting insulin go up. You'll see their hemoglobin A1C go up as well. And you just got to like, really choose your carbohydrates well and time them well too. So all those conversations open up based on their biomarkers.
Yeah, I always ask anytime we're doing anything in terms of interventions, particularly things that are a little bit more consistent, a little bit more hardcore, is what is the end result that we're looking for?
Mhm.
So that's the conversation I have with my mom. I'm like, what are we trying to do here?
Yeah.
Because if we're trying to create more longevity for you, reduce your inflammation, you really, optimize your cardiometabolic health, I think we're going in the wrong direction right now. So what can we do to modify this?
Yeah. And, we all know this and we say this a lot, but I think it's important to emphasize is there's a balance that our biology needs to live under. It needs to have some stresses and it needs to have time to relax. It needs to have heavy exercise, but it also needs to have just light movement. And every individual biology, you have to find where that balance lies in your own system. And it's always going to be changing. And you're not going to know this until you check some of these biomarkers.
Agreed, agreed. We all have different levels of resilience and we got to work from there. Absolutely. I want to talk about resilience. I want to talk a little bit about our gut health and our gut microbiome. Something that I feel, although we know it's the epicenter of our health and our immune system, tends to get pushed to the wayside a little bit in terms of us looking at it and doing deeper, kind of doing a deeper dive. What is the percentage of people that you're working with who could really stand to optimize their microbiome health?
It's a very high percentage. It's probably like 90% of people. It's really hard to have an optimized microbiome nowadays because of the environment we live in. Unfortunately, I think the way our life is structured, we all tend to eat out a lot. It's really hard for people to find the time to really cook and select their produce and their vegetables and everything the way they need to. So even if you're avoiding ultra processed food, there's a lot of variability in even the food that you choose that's after that. So microbiomes are always something that we're looking at. I would say that it becomes more urgent if you're symptomatic or you have inflammation. If not, we're still doing stool testing for microbiome. This is the other problem, is that there's so many stool test companies out there, gut health test companies out there, and really finding one that gives good data that is actionable is important. And then we're always trying to optimize people's microbiome in lifestyle, adding more fiber to their diet, adding more fermented foods, and then, just using some targeted supplements as well to help them improve their microbiome too. And it's still a very early science around microbiome science. And so we're still learning a lot as we move forward.
I agree with you there. I think it's still a very new science in terms of how we optimize. I have supplement protocols and food protocols and even lifestyle protocols. And a lot of times it does move the needle, but sometimes it takes a little bit more investigating. I feel like it's still very nuanced in terms of how we can optimize that. I wanted you to spend some time because I know that it's connected to our brain health, our mood, our energy levels. When I think about overall metabolic health, I always think about our microbiome as well, not just blood sugar regulation or moving our body, but that how we're eating really needs to reflect how we're supporting our microbiome. So it can't just be
100%.
just all protein all day long. Like, where's the fiber? Where I
Yeah,
love that.
so true. It's so true. I think, people go on a high protein diet every once in a while, and it's great. Like, I think it's helpful if you are needing to increase the amount of protein you have in your diet because most of us are not getting enough protein in our diet. And so it's a good way to get used to getting more protein in your diet by going on a high protein diet. Also, it's a form of an elimination diet. So a lot of people are eating a lot of ultra processed food. When they switch to a high protein diet, hopefully they're naturally eliminating ultra processed food. And people have metabolic health abnormalities. They're eating carbs incorrectly or the wrong carbs. So it can help as a temporary intervention. However, over the lifetime, for most individuals, I would say a complete elimination of fiber from your diet is going to be a net negative for sure. And you see it in your microbiome, but you also see it in colon cancer rates. You also see it in inflammation, all of that. And so fiber is extremely important, and especially to certain what we call keystone microbiome species that are in our gut. And so one of those, for example, is Akkermansia, which is a really important microbacteria in our gut. And we hear a lot about it, but we don't know about it through the whole science of GLP-1. So now we're injecting ourselves with these GLP-1 medications. Well, Akkermansia is the keystone bacterial species that encourages our gut to make more GLP-1. And because our diet has low fiber, has low fermented foods, has a lot of ultra processed food, we don't have enough Akkermansia, so we can't do that. And so, you can supplement with Akkermansia. There's supplements out there like Pendulum that you can get Akkermansia, but it's so important to support your own natural production of GLP-1 through supporting Akkermansia. And that's just one of these bacteria that I think are really well studied now and people need to know about.
Yeah, agreed. I was going to say, I feel like how we take care of our gut, including fiber and fermented foods. I mean, these are really the unsung heroes,
Mhm.
and they don't get a lot of press. They don't get a lot of attention, but it becomes so critical. I want to also steer really quickly. I wanted to talk to you specifically about, I know you mentioned peptides and you mentioned the biohacking piece of it. How often are your patients looking for something like that? Are they really looking for more of the consistency in terms of lifestyle strategies?
What's great about my patients is we see people on a membership program. And so we always frame it that, look, we're going to be working on your biology for a year. So we always need to start with the basics. Let's work a lot on really dialing in your lifestyle factors. Then from there, we start doing testing. And now we can, when we're doing testing after you've optimized your lifestyle factors, we get a lot better results on our tests, right? And so
Yes.
now we really know where to focus, right? And so testing before lifestyle interventions, it's useful because you can show where there's an emergency happening. But really, and I discovered this in my own life, is that once I got my lifestyle in order, all my tests naturally got a lot better. But then we can just kind of take them through this journey. And at the end of the journey is when we start talking about peptides, when we start talking about biologics like stem cells. And I feel like that's kind of like the right time to talk about it, kind of when you're got the rest of the basics organized.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, I think I always talk about hormones. I want you to be a good host, a great, healthy host for
Yes.
hormones. I want you to be a great, healthy host for peptides and for the biologics. And we do that by, again, focusing on those big pillars. And I think, listen, from my beautiful community of women who have got very busy lives and are taking care of families. And I think, I said focusing on those foundations, being consistent with those foundations and knowing what levers to pull for you specifically, I think it's always that first step. And then we can get fancy after we really dial things in and you're
Right.
feeling really good.
There are certain, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, there are certain times where we need to use the peptides and the hormones as interventions too, right?
Yes.
Concurrently. I mean, when someone has a severe gut health issue like leaky gut, I'll start them on BPC 157 peptide right off the bat. Or say they're recovering from a surgery, I would start them on like tesamorelin as things help them heal. Hormones, for example, if their thyroid is way off, we need to affect their thyroid, like those kind of things. And so it's always good to start with like some baseline labs. And this is something that I'm sure you'll agree with too. Like, You can't DIY this, unfortunately, yet.
Yeah.
You really need like a practitioner that's going to really sort through what's important, the timing of things, and understand your end of one situation in your biology, but also in your mind. Like, how much tolerance do you have for things like supplements, things like cold plunging, for example? It really takes someone who's going to work with you. And I think it's important that people are empowered with their biomarkers and they use some of these testing platforms that are out there, but also work with a practitioner that's going to help them sort through it all.
I agree. There's going to be, again, we talked about that level of resilience that you have, but also what's going to be the biggest needle to move. Also,
Yes.
if I've got a single mom who's got kids and all the things, and I create a very comprehensive protocol, and she comes back to me and she's like, I can't, there is no way I can make this work, then that's not helpful either.
No.
And so, you got to be able to partner with your practitioner, your provider. And that's what we all deserve. We deserve someone who's open minded, who's like, okay, here's the areas that we need to focus on. And how can we work together as a team to ensure that you are moving the needle in that direction?
Yeah, I always laugh when people come in with like a protocol that someone's made for them to change everything all at
Everything.
once, like 15 pages long. And, always there's like, here's the foods you should eat, here's the foods you shouldn't eat. It's like people just get so overwhelmed. And I get it. You can't do 150 things at the same time.
I agree with you. So, with that said, I have my last question for you, Dr. Shah, is if you could, and I get everyone is of N of one and we're looking at the data, but if there was 1 to 2 things that on average you are recommending, and we could have covered them already, and maybe it's just a beautiful kind of returning back to it, what are the things that you think, inherently are going to move the needle for most of us? Like if it was like one, because I always base it on wins. Like, how can I get you a win in the next 10 days or so as we're really, moving forward in your healthcare plan?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And so I think for me, the biggest win that I can get with a patient is for them to have time dedicated for them to focus on themselves. So I really try to get them into a routine that is daily. And so we just really sit down with their schedules and we try to figure out when that's going to be. For many people, it's the morning. For some people, it's not. But we just try to get that on their calendar. And I say, I don't even care what we do during those 30 minutes, but let's just try a few things. Let's try to figure out what we're going to do that you can stick to, that is some time for yourself, some time to disconnect, some time to focus on something that is going to be beneficial to you in many different ways. And for a lot of people, that's, maybe it's just reading, maybe it is meditating, maybe it's a stretching practice, maybe it's of meditation practice. There's so many things that we can put in there. Maybe it's like 5 minutes of each. Maybe it's just like 20, 15 push-ups. But I think getting that time into someone's schedule is the biggest win you can get with a patient by far.
I love that. I think you're absolutely right. Like just ensuring that they've got the time, holding them gently accountable to actually committing to that, whether that's a morning routine, it's an evening routine, or it's just 10 minutes for you. Yeah, I think it can change everything. And I think that was one of the things that you had said in the beginning of your own journey was that you carving out that hour for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think when I first started doing that, and it wasn't an hour to start with, it was like
I'm
maybe
sure it
20
wasn't.
minutes. Yeah.
That's a huge ask.
Yeah, it was like 20 minutes to start with, but then it became so important to me that it became an hour, and man, did it move the needle for me. That's why it only took 8 months to reverse 4 chronic diseases. It seems almost impossible if you ask, and a lot of my doctors thought they couldn't believe it, that I got off my methotrexate, which is a medicine for an autoimmune disease. And I did, and it worked.
I love it. That's so
Yeah.
incredible. That's why I really wanted to have you on is just to share that beacon of hope for what is possible, because so many of us are struggling with chronic conditions, particularly 40 and above, and that there's a lot that we can do to reverse that as long as we are willing to prioritize ourselves and carve out that time to focus on our health outcomes.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's such a great message that you're spreading through your podcast. I really enjoyed everything that we talked about as well, because, I think we need to pay particular attention in this conversation about women and perimenopause and thyroid disorders, all of that, because I feel that unfortunately, for the last 100 years, all the research, all the attention went to the male biology. And finally, there's this focus on women's biology and the things that are different. And I think everyone benefits from that. So thank you for all the conversations that you're bringing forth as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And then we'll have the link for the biomarkers. Dr. Shah, where else would you love to find you? I will have the link to Next Health as well.
Yeah, next-health.com is our clinical practice, and we're in 12 cities right now. And then we also have my social media, which is at Darshan Shah MD.
All right, Darshan, honey, it was such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you later on.
Yes, can't wait to see you. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.